Since the end of 2025, Minneapolis has been under occupation by federal agents.
We're all human beings here. I don't give a shit who you are, where you came from, what color you are. It doesn't fucking matter. This is wrong.
I'm a filmmaker who lives in San Francisco, but I'm originally from the Midwest, and I have friends in Minneapolis. One of them is Megan. Not only is she a resident there, but she also happens to hold a PhD in media studies. Of course, when I saw what was happening there, I gave her a call, and what she told me felt like info every American should know. So we decided to share these conversations with y'all and hope to get real info out there about what's been happening in Minneapolis and how we might be able to learn how to come together. Join us for the What Now on YouTube. Hi, welcome back to the What Now. This is actually our 4th episode, and we're doing it about mutual aid. I'm Christina Matwani. I'm a filmmaker located in San Francisco. So I'm here with Megan, who has a PhD in media studies and social movements and is a resident of Minneapolis. And so we're back with our conversations, and this time we're talking about mutual aid. But first, we're maybe gonna touch on some updates of what's happened in Minneapolis since Megan and I kind of last got together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess the report from the ground is quiet, and that's a good thing in my mind. Not a lot is happening, though we still are seeing people released from the Whipple Federal Building, which means people are still being detained, and that's kind of one of the biggest markers that ICE activity is still happening in the Twin Cities. There have been a lot of reports of ICE in St. Paul, Minnesota, so right across the river from Minneapolis, and there they've been in, kind of busy neighborhoods, local neighborhoods, kind of different socioeconomic, demographics. They've been all over the place. So nothing particularly raucous, I guess, to report on, but the presence is still there. Just this morning, there were some people reported seeing tanks driving through Minneapolis, not like being shipped. So they were on truck trailers and things like that. But, and yeah, again, just an uptick in kind of vehicles going into the Whipple Federal Building, but not a whole lot coming out. Just, in the long run, very good thing. And I feel like life is returning a little bit more to normal. You see more different kinds of neighbors and people of color back out on the streets and outside a little more than I've seen in quite a while, but still present for sure. And we never know how many agents are around, but the website People Over Papers says voluntary submissions of ICE reports and sightings and things like that, and their numbers have gone down quite a bit for sort of self-reported incidents in Minnesota in general.
So good mostly, but also they're not gone, which was kind of the rhetoric that was being fed.
Yeah.
2 weeks and they would leave, and that it's been well past that 2 weeks.
Well past it, and I think at least from my personal standpoint, I'm kind of, are they lying in wait? Are they waiting for kind of everyone to get a lot more complacent and peaceful and happy and let their guard down, and then try to do sort of something on a larger scale? And we'll know when we know.
So I've also heard that there's stuff going on in Vermont, right, with ICE.
Yeah, and it was kind of around the 11th of March that week. We saw ICE go into Burlington, Vermont, and kind of perform very similarly to what they did in Minneapolis, where a crew rolls up to a house and they have a quote-unquote targeted individual, and then they go try to detain that individual, which happened quite a bit in Minneapolis. And I think there was a lot of kind of dangerous driving and reckless driving by ICE in Vermont as well. And then this clip we have is actually the community's response to that, which again, pretty similar to Minneapolis, where neighbors and community members showed up as quickly as they could to both support the individual they were trying to detain, and to, generally protest the ICE activities.
Like a lion in my soul. I've got love for my neighbor. I've got love for my neighbor. I've got love for my neighbor in my soul. I've got love for my neighbor. I've got love for my neighbor. I've got love for my neighbor in my soul. So I've also seen a lot of headlines about how ICE is maybe going to be at the airports instead of TSA.
We have some big news right now. If you're flying, listen up, because not only is ICE going to be stationed at airports across the country, but according to Tom Homan, Donald Trump's supporters who appeared on television today, ICE could theoretically begin checking people's identification before they get to the TSA checkpoint. That's what he said. So essentially what he's claiming is that anyone entering an airport could now be subject to a possible verification screening of sorts from ICE agents patrolling the area. They're not going to be conducting screenings of bags coming through x-ray machines, for example. But what he's saying is that, say a loved one, a family member of someone flying is undocumented and walks them and helps them with their bag, they could theoretically be stopped by ICE and asked for identification and screened, even if they're never getting on a plane in the first place. That is serious, and that's a major update that I think a lot of people need to be aware of, especially if they're flying in the next several weeks. So spread the word, and I'll have more updates for you very soon. Follow along, stay up to date on all the news you need to know about. We have...
And I know another kind of component of what ICE has done at the Minneapolis airport is they actually arrested, detained, and deported a number of employees of the airport. You know, folks that had passed all of the required security screenings to even be able to have that position and report to work through airport security every day. A number of people were detained while they were at work at the airport in Minneapolis.
Yikes. Big yikes.
Big
That's
yikes.
scary. This seems like a violation of rights.
Again. And Chrissy, I did do a little bit of research. So what is stalled out is DHS funding in general. So they don't want to pass a Department of Homeland Security funding bill, and TSA is technically housed under the Department of Homeland Security. So that is why they specifically are not receiving pay right now.
Mm. Yeah, when I was traveling, there were videos of the Austin airport showing lines backed all the way to the freeway of people standing to go through security check at 5:30 in the morning. So
wow.
I mean, it was partially because it was also an event. So there's a lot of people and a lot of traveling, and it's a pretty small airport, but also because of the TSA issues currently happening. So yeah, pretty wild. Might not be a great time to travel.
For a number of reasons.
It seems like also the thing that I keep seeing a lot of stuff about is the economic impact on Minneapolis. I've seen the governor and the mayor talking about that there's been a huge impact there, and they're hoping to maybe get some money to help that. But yeah, you have some information about that, right?
Yeah, so I think, for anyone not in Minneapolis, the kind of arrests and flashpoints have slowed down quite a bit, but there's still tens of thousands of people who are not wanting to leave their homes because for fear of deportation or a run-in with ICE. And this is kind of on top of folks who weren't able to leave for all of January, all of February, and now, we're halfway through March. So that's 2.5 full months of no money coming in, not being able to go to the grocery store, rent is still due, things like that. And according to Minnesota Public Radio, in January alone, Minneapolis lost over $200 million in economic revenue because of the ICE presence and Operation Metro Surge. So if we think about that, we're probably over $500,000 in just lost revenue. And this is kind of in a city with a mayor that vetoed a city council resolution recently within the last week or so, extending the legal period a landlord must kind of give notification for the tenants. So um, currently it's 30 days. So a landlord can say, you have 30 days to be out of this rental property for X, Y, or Z. The city council was attempting to extend that to 60 days. So for the landlord had to give you 60 days notice, no matter what the reason, prior to eviction, and the mayor vetoed it. And
is that the article that we have?
Yep, and we do have a Minnesota Public Radio story about that from March 11th.
Yeah, look at him.
He's a mayor.
Yeah,
that's what they tell me. So
yeah, I've seen a bunch of stuff about that they were hoping to pass some rent freezes and stable, and it just like hasn't gone anywhere.
No, and the kind of city council savvy, and this was something they thought would help people and be very sound policy for the city. And Rent is phrase proposing a $1 million rental assistance fund funded by the city instead, which is, it's something. And I kind of think, this is why having a conversation about mutual aid is so important, because the protests and the kind of the strike and the things the news have covered are really important, but their economic impacts for individuals, the city, businesses, small businesses in particular, throughout all of that. And one of the only ways to kind of keep a support system going and keep people eating, living, and kind of, existing, is to do it yourself, to do it with your neighbors, to do it with organizations, nonprofits, all that kind of thing. And so as the, anywhere ICE is present or anywhere kind of resistance is happening, a foundational component of that is some of those economic and community resources that keep people ability to eat and have joy and to get where they need to go, etc.
Yeah. So that's a great segue for us to talk about mutual aid, which is the topic of this episode. And I think from the outside, as somebody who's not there and doesn't know what it's like on the ground, I have just online seen people talking about mutual aid and mutual aid in regards to Minneapolis in particular, that you guys really have shown a model of mutual aid that's really inspired people. So yeah, I don't know that much about mutual aid though, so I'm looking forward to learning more and how maybe I can start implementing some mutual aid here in San Francisco.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Chrissy, what do you know? What did you know prior to all of this? Did you have any reference points, any recognition of the term?
I mean, just from context clues, I can take from the term, it sounds like giving aid and receiving aid, mutual aid. And I was like a little bit familiar with the idea that that kind of like some what would be considered radical movements like the Black Panthers employed some mutual aid, like giving free breakfast to kids, which I found to be, as somebody who doesn't know that much about the Black Panthers or about social movements, I found that to be so interesting because it's kind of antithetical to the idea that people have about what the Black Panthers do. Like, oh, okay, they're like these militant, revolutionary people, and they are revolutionary, but they're like a big part of their tenets are providing mutual aid for their community. So that's about all I know about it though, other than also like the little bits I've seen through social media about the mutual aid that has been happening in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and I think, one thing I do want to preface our conversation with is that kind of the idea and function of mutual aid has really been BIPOC led in Minneapolis, certainly, and a lot of the kind of reason that mutual aid and grassroots organizations had to be organized in the first place is that the sort of current government system or the safety nets or like kind of the community building resources that state and federal governments had were not serving communities of color, marginalized communities, and things like that. So while um, it is kind of a larger piece of a resistance puzzle, it does come out of an unfortunate need from BIPOC communities to sort of support and maintain themselves outside of the safety nets of, traditional government sort of programs and things like that. And, kind of a really good older example is the Montgomery bus boycott in the 1955, right? That lasted over a year. And so if you think about all of the folks who normally would have taken the bus to go to work or to pick up their kids from school or, et cetera, there had to be a system in place to transport all those people during that type of boycott. So if that's a good example of kind of how a lot of BIPOC communities implemented mutual aid a long time ago before we had Instagram and GoFundMe and those kinds of things. So just to put it in a little context for everybody.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think thinking about some of those historical movements, I never really considered the fact that people still have to do the things that they need to do in order to survive. And so they need to rely on the movement or the group of people to help them still get to work or still get to school or still provide food for their family. Because, that's part of the risk and part of the sacrifice that you're making when you're doing kind of direct actions or protesting or boycotting. And like the world doesn't stop. Your life doesn't stop. You have to still keep going. So it seems like the only way that you could do that is through the help of your community. And that's why it's important to be together. Our normal kind of rugged individualism doesn't work in this place.
No, that's extremely well said. And it is, again, especially when, the resistance is to kind of government entities, it's like we do rely on and have traditionally relied on, a lot of those supports, right? Or even the bus system. Like if you can't take the bus to work for some reason, or Target is the closest grocery store to your house, the idea of a boycott is a little more difficult, right? So kind of the community steps in there, ideally, right? And to kind of give a little bit more of a current and contemporary explanation of mutual aid, we are going to turn to Ashley Fairbanks, who is a San Antonio activist, who is hometown is Minneapolis, and they go into quite a bit of detail on the basics. And Fairbanks actually started a group called Stand With Minnesota, and as of February 24th had raised over $20 million for mutual aid directed at helping out Minnesota. So I'll turn it over to Ashley. I know, right?
That's a lot of money.
So we'll ask the expert.
Yeah.
I'm Ashley Fairbanks, Asanawikwe, Indigenous Cause, Ajajakandurim. I'm a creative director and an author and designer, etc.
You're like me, you have a lot of slashes after your
Yes, a
name.
multi-hyphenate. We're called on LinkedIn.
Yeah, multi-hyphenate, yes. Polymath is also the thing I've heard, which just means I have a lot of jobs because I have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of dependence.
Yes.
And give me some examples. Somebody who says this sounds complicated, give me examples of mutual aid.
Yes, I'm very cash focused right now because it's like the first of the month. We're paying people's rent right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been raising like hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past few days to try to prevent families from getting evicted. So like cash is one, that's a very common mutual aid thing.
Yeah.
But also it's like, donating items, and not just that either. It's like the neighborly behaviors, right? So making your neighbor who you know is out doing ice watch a pot of soup. Whatever the need is, just meeting it without having kind of an expectation of exchange of money for services.
So yeah, when you say doing childcare for folks, you mean for free?
Yes.
Like I will watch your kid while you're doing something else.
Yeah. So I built the website, and I have a decent following on Blue Sky, and it was able to just really spread rapidly through folks.
Yeah. And this is a website that just collects links and places you can give mutual aid to, whether it's money or goods or services.
A lady reached out and donated 500,000 Sky Miles.
Oh. Right.
And I posted about it on my Blue Sky because I was like, this is pretty cool that she donated these Sky Miles. And people just started like emailing me like crazy, like, oh, I have 100,000, I have 500,000. And so we just made a form on the website, which you can go to at standwithminnesota.com, and fill out to donate your frequent flyer miles. If you have 50,000 plus, because that's about what books one-way ticket.
Okay.
In the immediate time frame. So you can go there, and then people can also request flights home from detention. And we've also been bringing people home who, like, their mom got detained. They live in Kentucky, and they have to come here to take care of their little siblings.
Oh, wow.
And so we're booking flights for stuff like that too. They're just dumping people out of the detention centers in Texas.
Yeah.
Once they figure out that you're a citizen or that you have a legal status, they'll just basically like let you out, and you're on your own.
But you're just on the street.
And your family hasn't had your income in 2 months, and you have no way to get home.
Yeah.
And now this is the best thing, the Sky Miles thing, because we actually have an answer for them.
Yeah.
Like with rent, I'm like, I'll try to find the money somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Like I get all these sad emails every day, and I have no answer for them. But then we can actually, with this, be like, I'll get you a flight booked today. Like you'll be here tomorrow to take care of your siblings.
Wow, really cool. I didn't even think about the frequent flyer mile thing, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a really, really great kind of like just collective of what of anything do you have that might be useful to someone else in a given capacity at a given moment. And I think, like she said, it's something that you would give without the expectation of money changing hands per se, unless there was, rent you can't really pay in canned goods, you can't pay in babysitting services, things like that. But
yeah, I guess one cool takeaway that I think could be for the people who are listening to us is the way that she talks about it is it's whatever you can provide. So it's not like you need to, you don't have to go all the way in to like be involved. Like you don't have to, spend your life savings or make some giant sacrifice. You just make a small one, or use a little bit of your time, but that there's an entry point kind of for anyone. Like, hey, even if it's donating some of your used clothes, or donating some time to cook for someone or to run an errand, or it's just, or even just checking on your neighbor. There, you don't have to go from 0 to 100, basically, is the short end of it, which I think is, I'm hoping will make people feel like it's easier to get involved.
Yeah, and this analogy doesn't track for the entire country, but it's certainly a very Minnesota one. If you have ever shoveled your elderly neighbor's sidewalk, you have done mutual aid. Or
Yes.
someone doesn't have a snowblower. We have like 2 people on the block have snowblowers, and almost every snowstorm my front walk is done by that individual, and I couldn't be happier. So that is a form. It is most basic, right?
Yes, I have to say I don't miss having to deal with that myself. But I'm glad that you have neighbors that are willing to help you with it, because it is in the Midwest, that is an ordeal every year. And I'm sure during all of this, it's been even more pronounced because people don't want to leave their homes or don't want to be caught out on the street. And so you might feel a bit like a sitting duck if you're shoveling the sidewalk.
Something, well, I think it's a beautiful Midwest example, but also a tragic example, right? Because it's like that very basic piece of Midwest winter humanity, like you're unable to participate in even that. So I think, that's the in the broadest brushstrokes, that's sort of the idea of mutual aid, a little bit of the historical context behind it. And LA and Chicago have also done a lot of mutual aid, and kind of I think to a lesser extent because the stays were a little bit shorter, or just less aggressive. It hasn't gotten as much sort of news, but LA and Chicago have also done a lot of mutual aid in response to ICE within their own local communities.
I would think in those cities too, it's got to be a little bit different. Like, I'm not that familiar with Chicago, but I'm more familiar with LA, and just the nature of the city itself, how it's more spread out. There's less, just by the nature of the architecture of the city, it's harder to come together. But I have heard of mutual aid happening in LA and even here in San Francisco, not necessarily around the ICE stuff, but we have a pretty big housing crisis, and so we have a lot of unhoused people here. And so I have heard of some mutual aid that's been involved with some of those issues, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure every city's mutual aid is kind of different.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the ethos really behind mutual aid too, right? Is that it serves the immediate needs of the humans that need it. And as we talked about in the last episode, a lot of the groundwork and kind of infrastructure really for mutual aid in Minneapolis was laid during the 2020 uprising, when things were just unpredictable, to say the least, right? But a lot of the kind of infrastructure and the support and the sort of protest support, like volunteering to be a marshal or a medic, or spending time in George Floyd Square, volunteering, to kind of work the barricades of the autonomous zone or bring firewood or things like that, were all kind of tested and honed, I suppose, during 2020.
This is not a question that you can probably answer, but it's just a thought I have. I wonder if it seems to me like you wouldn't want to target Minneapolis because they already have a robust network, but then also at the same time, it almost feels like maybe it was partially targeted because it has a robust network. Like antagonistic. Yeah. I don't know. It seems odd to me. Like logic would tell you, oh, don't mess with these people. They're already organized.
I mean, I don't know that the ego of people making those kinds of decisions is really in line with reality.
Sure. Yeah.
So there might have been a kind of go for the big the bellwether, because it's no big deal, we got this. But there was also a ton of beef in 2020 with Trump and Walz, and kind of the handling of George Floyd, because Trump was technically still president during all of that. So I think there's sort of a long-standing target on the back of Minneapolis.
Yeah, and some old beef also over probably the election. So
yeah, probably.
So whatever.
Flavor of the day.
Yeah. Also, like, you can't rely on logic, I guess, at this juncture. But to me, the logical thing would be like, oh, these people could potentially actually stand up to us.
Seems like they've done it before. I don't know.
Yeah. Which, you guys did. And despite, all of this turmoil, I know I've said it before in other episodes, but I just think it's so impressive that you guys are still standing. And even though like shit's still going down and it's probably not going to get taken care of for a long time, like completely taken care of. I consider it a win, because they did kind of put their tail between their legs towards this end part, so that's my 2 cents.
I mean, and I think we can definitely say that the fanfare they were hoping to like ride out on did not happen. I think you're right that they put the tail between the legs and have gone out with much more of a whimper than they were hoping to. The impact is still very real and very still present at this time. I was at work at the other day, and I work at a local co-op, and I know that we are still doing monetary and food donations for a group that's feeding over 100 families just in Northeast Minneapolis. So that's one tiny neighborhood in the greater city. So the need is still very much there.
Yeah.
But I think the shock and awe bullshit didn't work.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah. So I've tried to look for a number, sort of grand total or any ballpark estimate of how much sort of money was even donated. And again, mutual aids could be just somebody babysitting while someone goes to work, etc., or sort of exchange of services. I can't find a number that anyone has reported on or put together, but I can say that we saw Ashley Fairbanks and Stand With Minnesota. They've raised about $20 million at least. And I know several concerts have raised in the hundreds of thousands, some 600,000, almost 200,000 for some of the bigger name donations. The rent kind of funds are primarily being run by neighborhood organizations. Each Minneapolis neighborhood has kind of a civic group that functions as a neighborhood organization, and they have raised $500,000 and $600,000 a month for folks. So we'd love to be able to put a little bit of a total on things. We may have an update in the future, but what we can say is a lot of fucking money has been raised by people for people in Minneapolis. So yay, we the people, we keep us safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think that we have some examples or clips to show about the mutual aid that's happened in Minneapolis, and also could be resources for people who aren't in Minneapolis and who would like to get involved in giving to Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, and just kind of, that's a little bit of a smattering of general ideas about what mutual aid can encompass and what it has encompassed in Minneapolis, and just to give you sort of an idea of maybe it'll spark an idea for you. So yeah, this is Lake Street Distro, which is focused on South Minneapolis and primarily food donations.
And they have their Venmo and their Cash App here too.
Yep. So most organizations, you can either donate funds if you have them, or if you wanted to bring the list of goods to one of the drop-off locations, another really easy way to do it. One of the most important kind of components that I liked about this example was the updated needs list. So it's really helpful as an organization or an organizer that you're putting out the needs that the people you're working with actually desire, right? So it could be really easy to get 30 cases of bottled water, but if nobody wants bottled water, that donation and that aid isn't serving the needs of those asking for it, right? So what a lot of Minneapolis organizations have done is update the needs list as time has progressed and been very specific about the ask and the donation. And that's something I think, if you're unfamiliar with mutual aid or haven't done it before, might be a little bit off-putting to some people, but that really is sort of the nature of what mutual aid tries to do, is get things that people need and request and ask for to them specifically. So, you can see there's no potatoes on there. There's no kind of fresh produce because that organization has a produce fund that they'll go buy fresh. And grocery bags, you know, so that's not something you might think about, but the they need something to carry the food to the individuals in, you know. I know the co-op I work at has donated a lot of boxes because we have so many, and it's like you need something to transport the items, right? So
Yeah,
that
like-
kind of
Oh, it kind of reminds me of, like, I remember when there had been kind of like donation drives for unhoused folks, and one of the things that was like the ask is socks, which brand new socks, which is like not something that people think to necessarily donate, but it is something that's like the biggest need. It's like we have plenty of clothes, we don't have socks. So yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, and kind of something, a sort of mind space to get yourself in a little bit, as you know, I think mutual aid expands and becomes more universal, unfortunately, is that you know, they are ask for what you need, donate what they need.
Yeah. Okay, should we do the next one? This one looks like a cool one.
Yeah, so this was a local bookseller who has space and connections with the artists put on a craft night, you know, where you're sort of donating, you're building community, you're kind of working together with other organizations. Like the Lake Street Food Distro is actually part of this craft night, right? So you're seeing sort of the networking connections in action a little bit, and make fun bookmarks and hang out and, you know, donate $5 to $10. And, you know, it's kind of, you know, again, they are probably already had the supplies to do this, right? And so it's like, oh, we have supplies. We'd love to bring people together. I bet they'd give $5 or $10 to come hang out and make cool stuff. And everybody wins.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's also like young people need ways to stay busy and engaged, and I'm assuming something like this would appeal to them, especially when some of them have not been in school for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, space is a resource, community is a resource, especially during times when it doesn't feel like it is. And I think it's okay to have joy even among it in times of resistance and crisis. Like there's a quote from AIDS activists that said, you know, we protested all day and we danced all night because we needed to sustain the movement.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually never heard that before.
Yeah, it's not always the case, but there is always a place for some joy.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we also have this vegan tamales, which sound really good.
Yeah, this one's coming right up. I think I will be grabbing some tamales. So, you know, as simple as this is an individual who is doing something that they know how to do and, you know, providing direct support to one of their neighbors. So, I mean, this is kind of an example of just how small, hyper local, kind of, it doesn't have to be fancy, right? Every penny supports a neighbor in need, so give generously, share widely. And they're like, come get some tamales that either, you know, they or the neighbor made or making together or whatever. And it can be that one-to-one, I guess, or that individual level.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then we have this, which this is one that I've been following too, which is Smitten Kitten, which is a local sex shop.
Correct.
In Minneapolis.
Been there forever.
And they've been extremely active online, and I'm sure in real life, in the community while this has been happening. And so like people that I know who don't even live in Minneapolis, but have an interest in what's been going on with ICE there, have also been following Smitten Kitten. And it seems like these guys are doing a ton of mutual aid and things. So let's watch this clip.
Dolly and Noemi, if you have been following Smitten Kitten These are the awesome social workers that I was helping at the beginning. And now this is round 2. So I'm gonna let them talk about what we need to do now. We're talking about emergency support for youth impacted by ICE raids.
First of all, we just want to say thank you. We did a first round of fundraising, and that is when Anne plugged my Venmo, and you guys helped raise over $30,000, and all of that money went towards groceries, rent aid. I just want to say thank you for that. And now we're asking for a second round of donations. This time it is specifically focused on our youth. Some of the things that we want to focus on now is tutoring and mental health.
A lot of our youth are struggling with trauma from this. We have stories of students waking up at 3 a.m. hearing whistles. And we want to get them connected to the right people so that they can get the help that they need. Our kids missed over 2 months of school, and our children of color are already at a disadvantage when it comes to education. This is going to make it worse. So we're trying to fill in the gaps.
And it really takes like a village, but especially people like these two amazing people who are dedicated, doing like 16-hour days every day to make sure that everyone is okay. The stories that I've heard, even just from hanging out with these two, are heartbreaking and enraging. So let's use our rage and our heartbreak to propel us through this moment. Way to go, Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that one I think is from within the last few days, right? So this is kind of another interesting example because it not only shows like how wide a variety mutual aid can encompass, but it also shows kind of the progression of trauma and tragedy that is still and will still be in this city and many others for a long time. So as they said, a lot of children in particular, not to mention all of the adults, have some probably lasting impacts of what they had to experience, hearing whistles, being out of school. Kids could not go to school here for, most of January, February, and into March. So yeah, kind of another kind of example of a different type of mutual aid, but also sort of where Minneapolis is at now and what the needs are here now.
Cool. Everybody should follow Smitten Kitten on.
Smitten Kitten's amazing. They were amazing before all of this went down. They'll be legendary after, but have really been out front, loud, and thinking about queer communities, trans communities, really holistically about what they can provide and who needs aid, and they have a real intersectional view on the world and life and sex, and they're fantastic over there.
Yeah, I kind of have noticed while doing some research for this and working on our Instagram that there are a lot of sex shops that actually are not only in Minneapolis, in other cities, like locally owned small business sex shops that seem to be really participating very heavily in their community, which is very cool.
Yeah. And, kind of, again, another example of how and ways that mutual aid sort of originated out of the necessity of marginalized communities, right? The queer community, trans community, have specific needs, and they kind of the businesses and kind of community bastions, I suppose, for those communities too, have been helping each other out for a long time.
Pretty cool.
They donated like 500 dildos to protesters, and everyone went to the Whipple building during kind of like the height of Operation Metro Surge, and everyone got to throw dildos at the ICE vehicles and the state troopers, and I think it was cathartic. It was beautiful. It was colorful. It was everything.
That's pretty good.
There can be joy even in protest.
Yes.
I think
Yeah. Thank God.
cathartic might be a good word for that one.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So another group that we haven't really mentioned before, but has been an absolute integral part of the aid in Minneapolis and kind of just supporting folks where they need to be met is called Haven Watch. And these folks have been sitting outside the Whipple Detention Center where people have been detained and held. It's the federal building where ICE is kind of using that as their headquarters. So Haven Watch folks have been standing outside 24 hours a day. And when people get released, they've been released in the dead of winter in Minnesota, oftentimes with no jackets, very little clothing, no shoes, no phone, no documents, no ride, no way to get home. They haven't been in contact with their loved ones, right? So Haven Watch meets them at the gate with a blanket and has phone cards available so they can call someone, has drivers who will take them anywhere they need to go, and also has hot meals ready and water and things like that. And, coats, a change of clothes, blankets. So that's another one I wanted to make sure we showed. And that's, that kind of mutual aid is obviously very specific to ICE surges and being in the Twin Cities. But for those of you in other cities, that's something that I think is just, it's just beautiful. Makes me emotional every time.
Okay, let's watch.
I know, and to be met in a humane way after such an inhumane experience is really one way we can support folks who are going through the ICE detention specifically.
I think one thing that might be a little bit interesting to talk about is also, I think that if you're not familiar with direct or with mutual aid like this, and you see something like that, you kind of wonder, oh, are those like people who are, activists who are always doing stuff like this? But that's not the case, right? Like a lot of these people are moms and dads and people who work all different kinds of jobs and aren't necessarily even out there protesting that much or involved in some big activist life. They just have found a way that they can help and they've gotten involved, right?
Yeah, no, and that's a great to point out, Chrissy. Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. A lot of these folks have been, teachers, people who are working one, if not two other jobs already, people who, have families, kids, everyday Minnesotans, very much every day. Some faith leaders, but again, who have other responsibilities and duties. But the majority, and that's, one of the mutual things with mutual aid is it can just be between you and your neighbors. You don't have to have any affiliation, any certification, any organization at all behind you. And here it really has been. I have two friends who one was she has a high schooler, but she volunteered to drive elementary school kids to school and back safely. Another one is what drove teachers back and forth to work safely. I found a blender for someone who I work with because she wasn't able to go to the store and she really, needed a blender. And I was like, okay, here you go. We find a blender. So yeah, it's everybody doing the little bit that they can, and I think that brings up another interesting point too, where, you can do mutual aid without it being your full-time job. You can make 3 meals a week for a family and you're doing mutual aid. You can make a bigger portion of what you're making for dinner that night. And that's also mutual aid. So yeah, some organization, but a lot of it in Minneapolis, at least, has been neighborhood associations, small businesses, employees of restaurants, for example, setting up rideshare programs and paying rent for people that they know are unable to, so yeah, these are not full-time activists. These are everyday folks.
Wow. Well, I hope that inspires some people out there who are watching this, who are like, oh, it's going to be that idea again from 0 to 100. Like, no, you can come in at like 3. Like you don't have to like change your whole life to help somebody in a small way.
No, you don't. But I think helping somebody in a small way will change your life.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching the What Now. We are going to have more resources in the description below, links to mutual aid that you could get involved in, and just more information about mutual aid if you want to do more of a deep dive. I'm sure there's some really great resources that Megan has pulled together for us. So, and then if you are involved in mutual aid or you have an interest in mutual aid, maybe put a comment below about how you want to get involved or what you're doing, or links to mutual aid organizations that you've been working with. And make sure to like and subscribe and tune in next week, because we'll be back with more information. Thank you.